K2 has a death rate nearly 3 times higher than Everest, and every single person on this list believed they had done everything right. These are not stories about reckless thrill seekers who had no business being on a mountain. These are stories about engineers, surgeons, athletes, and professionals who trained for years, spent tens of thousands of dollars, and still did not come home. So here's the question you need to sit with before this video is over. If the most prepared climbers in the world can die on K2, what does that tell us about the systems supposed to keep them alive? 6 people. 6 different mountains of error. One mountain that does not forgive any of them. We start where K2's reputation was first cemented in blood. It was August 2nd when the Serac above the bottleneck released. 13 climbers were above 8,000 meters when it happened. 3 of them never came down. Daniel Reyes was a 41-year-old civil engineer from Vancouver. He had paid $68,000 to a guiding company called Summit Arc Expeditions, trained for 19 months, and summited both Aconcagua and Denali. When his lead Sherpa, Nima Wangchu, told him the ice above the bottleneck showed unusual melt fractures along its lower face, Daniel held up his phone and pointed at the weather app. Clear skies. Perfect window. He kept showing me the forecast like it proved something, Nima Wangchu later told investigators. I told him the forecast does not hold up a Serac. Summit Arc's lead guide, Roshan Karki, had flagged the same concern at 4 a.m. The company's operations manager, calling from Islamabad, told him to proceed. The season was ending. When the clients had paid, the window was real. What the operations manager did not tell Roshan was that the Pakistan Meteorological Department had issued a formal ice stability advisory for K2's south face the previous night at 11 p.m. That advisory named the bottleneck Serac specifically. The operations manager had received it. He had not passed it on. Daniel clipped into the fixed line at 6:15 a.m. The air at that elevation is so thin that 20 steps feel like running. His frozen snot crackled inside his balaclava. The prayer flags at Camp 4 snapped like rifle shots in the gusting wind. He felt unstoppable. At 3:47 p.m., the Serac let go. The sound reached base camp 5 kilometers away. Daniel was struck mid-traverse and carried 200 meters down the face before the rope caught him. He survived with 2 broken ribs and a shattered forearm. 3 other climbers on the fixed line above him did not survive at all. The investigation confirmed what Roshan had feared at 4 a.m. The advisory had existed. The warning had been real, and someone had decided the summit schedule mattered more than sharing it. That is how K2 takes its first victims, not with surprise, with suppressed information. The second incident moved faster. It always does when there is no one left to slow you down. Leila Navarro was 33, a fitness influencer from Madrid with nearly 900,000 followers and a gear sponsorship that required summit footage or a refund. She had hired an agency called Highline Adventures, which offered what their website described as semi-guided ascents. What that meant in practice was a single high-altitude porter above base camp, no dedicated guide, and no supplemental oxygen above 7,500 meters. Her porter, Ghulam Sadiq, asked her to turn around at the shoulder. She was vomiting. Her speech had gone clipped and strange. Her pace had slowed to 40 steps between rest stops. She told me she had not come this far to fail on camera, Ghulam said later. I told her that was not the mountain's problem. She pushed on without him. Above 8,200 meters, the headache she had been calling dehydration became something else entirely. High-altitude cerebral edema, HACE, begins as pressure behind the eyes and ends with the brain swelling against the skull. Leila's GPS track shows she continued climbing for 20 minutes after the headache became unbearable. She sat down at 8,400 meters and could not get up. Winds hit 75 miles per hour. Temperature dropped to minus 38 Celsius. She was alone. Ghulam radioed for 2 hours before anyone at base camp responded. The helicopter made one approach the following morning and was turned back by wind shear. By the time a ground team reached her, she had been exposed for 19 hours. She died of HACE and severe hypothermia. The investigation found that Highline Adventures had no permit for assisted solo climbing above Camp 2, no emergency extraction plan, and had known about the sponsorship contract's summit or refund clause before approving Leila's itinerary. 3 people inside that company knew the protocol was broken. Not one of them stopped it. Her last post is still up. People are still commenting. Nobody has taken it down. Thomas Weld fell 14 feet into a crevasse before the rope caught him. He struck both walls on the way down. The sound, according to witnesses nearby, he was like a bat hitting frozen wood. Thomas was 47, an operations director from Houston, who had completed 2 Himalayan treks and believed that made him ready for K2. His guiding company, Karakoram Elite Expeditions, had quietly changed their guide-to-client ratio that season, from 1:1 to 1:3 to offset rising permit costs. His assigned guide, Babar Syed, was managing 2 other clients simultaneously when Thomas left the marked descent route in a whiteout, the frostbite tingling in Thomas's left boot, which he had been dismissing as cramping since the previous morning, had by then progressed to the point where he could no longer feel the ground properly. He had not reported it to anyone. The crevasse he stepped into was 80 meters east of the fixed wands. He had navigated by memory through zero visibility conditions and had been wrong. Babar reached the lip within 6 minutes. Thomas was conscious on a narrow ice ledge at the bottom, both legs broken, temperature -31 outside and dropping. The helicopter made 3 attempts before weather forced a full aboard. Babar spent the night lying across Thomas to share body heat, improvising splints from whatever he could cut from his pack. Thomas was extracted the next morning. He survived but lost 3 toes to frostbite and spent 18 months in rehabilitation. The investigation confirmed that Karakoram Elite had never disclosed the ratio change to clients. Thomas had signed a briefing document guaranteeing 1-to-1 guide coverage. What he received was not that. The company's permit was suspended for 2 seasons. It did not bring back the toes. Omar Fitch knew his permit had expired. He pushed for the summit anyway. The permit said September 15th as the final authorized date. Omar, a 38-year-old adventure photographer from Nairobi, took his 2-man team up on September 22nd. He had calculated that by the time anyone at base camp checked, they would already be on their way down. He had not calculated what late-season K2 does to loose rock. The freeze-thaw cycle that holds stone embedded in ice all summer reverses in autumn. Rock peels away from the Abruzzi spur in sheets. At 7,200 meters, a rockfall hit Omar's climbing partner, Swiss guide Stefan Brugger, in the right shoulder and collarbone. The sound, Omar wrote in his expedition report, was like a drawer full of cutlery thrown down a staircase. Omar got Stefan down to Camp 2 in 7 hours, alone, in deteriorating weather, rebuilding his anchor rigging 3 times when placements failed. But Stefan survived. Omar lost 2 fingers on his right hand to frostbite sustained during the descent. K2 base camp management had flagged the team's out-of-window presence 2 days earlier and had been trying to reach them. The radio had been left at Camp 1 to save pack weight. The mountain does not honor expired permits. It never has. Priya Mehta's phone was still in her hand when the rescue team found her. The message on the screen was addressed to her daughter. It read, "I can see the stars from H," and then it stopped. Priya was a 44-year-old pediatric surgeon from Mumbai who had spent 3 years preparing for this climb. She was meticulous. She had done everything right. The only thing she had not done was personally inspect her oxygen regulator. In a pre-expedition equipment check at her agency's Islamabad depot, had flagged that regulator as showing pressure inconsistency. The technician marked it serviceable. The replacement cost was $340. The agency absorbed the note into a file and moved on. At 8,100 meters during her summit push, the regulator failed. Oxygen flow dropped to near zero. At that altitude, without supplemental oxygen, cognitive impairment begins within minutes. Priya's GPS track shows she continued climbing for an estimated 20 more minutes after the failure, moving slowly, missing route corrections she would have made if fully conscious. She sat down 180 meters from Camp 4, her beacon activated. Rescue teams were dispatched immediately and reached her in under 2 hours. Her core temperature was 28.1 Celsius. They warmed her, gave her oxygen, deloaded her on a stretcher. She died during the descent at 7,600 meters from cardiac arrest caused by severe hypothermia and prolonged oxygen deprivation. The failed regulator was recovered. The technician's original flag was recovered. The $340 figure appeared in the investigation file as a line item under maintenance cost decisions. Priya had trusted a piece of equipment she had no reason to distrust. The agency had sent 12 clients up K2 that season with equipment inspected by the same depot. She was the only one who died. She was also the only one whose regulator had been flagged and cleared by someone who would not be there when it failed. And then there is James Okafor. This is the one that does not let go. James was 36 years old, a Lagos-based investment banker who had spent 2 years building toward this climb. He was not impulsive. He was not reckless. He had researched guiding companies for months before settling on Pinnacle Ascent Group, a well-regarded expedition service whose website listed a safety record going back 15 years. He had read the reviews. He had spoken to former clients. He had paid for the full support package, which included dedicated guide coverage above Camp 3, supplemental oxygen, and emergency evacuation coordination. James had done everything a careful person does before trusting a company with his life. He reached the summit of K2 at 1:14 p.m. Witnesses from another expedition team camped at the shoulder later confirmed they saw him on the upper pyramid that afternoon, moving steadily, clipped into the fixed line. His guide, Dawa Sherpa, a highly experienced Balti climber with 11K 2 summits across a 14-year guiding career, was with him at every step. The descent started well. The weather was holding. The wind at the summit had been manageable. James was tired the way every climber is tired coming down from 8,611 meters, which is a different kind of tired than anything most people will ever feel. At that altitude, the air holds roughly a third of the oxygen available at sea level. Your blood thickens, your thoughts slow. Your body is running on reserves it borrowed from itself hours ago and has not yet paid back. At 7,800 meters, James stopped moving. Dawa was 4 meters behind him on the fixed line when it happened. James did not fall. He simply sat down in the snow, slowly, like a man lowering himself into a chair. Dawa reached him in seconds and knew within the first 30 of what he was dealing with. The breathing was labored and wet, a sound Dawa later described to the inquiry board as similar to someone trying to breathe through a soaked cloth. James was confused. He could not answer simple questions correctly. His lips had gone the pale gray color that experienced guides recognize before they can name it: high-altitude pulmonary edema, HAPE. The condition occurs when fluid leaks into the lungs at extreme elevation, slowly filling the spaces where air should be. It develops fast and kills faster. Every guide who works above 7,000 meters knows the signs. Every guiding company that operates on K2 has an emergency response protocol specifically for this scenario. The protocol is not complicated. It requires one action above everything else. You call for rescue immediately, not after confirmation, not after assessment, immediately. Dawa radioed base camp at 4:18 p.m. He gave James's exact condition. He gave the GPS coordinates to 4 decimal places. He requested immediate helicopter coordination and asked for a ground rescue team to begin ascending from Camp 3 without delay. His transmission was clear. The weather at that elevation was still within flyable parameters. A helicopter dispatched within the hour could have reached the shoulder by early evening. A ground team beginning ascent at 4:30 p.m. could have reached James' position before dark. The response took 4 hours. What happened in those 4 hours was documented in the subsequent inquiry and reported in full by the Pakistan Alpine Club's Incident Review Board. Pinnacle Ascent Group's base camp coordinator, a 29-year-old logistics manager on his first K2 season, received Dawa's transmission at 4:21 p.m. He did not contact the Pakistani Rescue Coordination Authority. He did not contact the helicopter dispatch service on standby in Skardu. He picked up the satellite phone and called Pinnacle Ascent Group's UK headquarters. The call lasted 22 minutes. The subject of the call was whether James Okafor's condition qualified as a rescue event under the specific language of the company's insurance policy, which contained a clause distinguishing between altitude-related medical emergencies and what the policy termed self-induced incapacitation. The coordinator was not sure which category applied. He wanted guidance before he acted. He made 4 calls in total over the next 90 minutes, 3 to the UK office, and 1 to a third-party insurance broker in Edinburgh. At no point during those 90 minutes did he contact official rescue services. Meanwhile, at 7,800 meters, Dawa Sherpa was keeping a man alive with nothing but a spare oxygen canister and his voice. He had given James his own supplemental oxygen within the first 10 minutes, dropping his own supply to reserve levels to do it. He kept James upright against the slope because lying flat accelerates fluid accumulation in the lungs. He talked to James without stopping, not because conversation was medically indicated, but because as long as James was responding, even poorly, even with single words and confused half sentences, he was still there. The temperature at that elevation had dropped to minus 27 degrees Celsius. The wind was picking up from the northwest. Dawa knew what was coming if help did not arrive before dark. He kept asking me if his family would be okay, Dawa told the inquiry board afterward. The transcript notes that his voice was completely flat when he said it. He asked me 3 times. I told him they would be fine. I told him he would see them very soon. I was trying to believe it myself. At 6:11 p.m., 93 minutes after Dawa's initial radio call, the base camp coordinator finally contacted the Pakistani Rescue Coordination Authority in Islamabad. The official rescue log timestamps the call at 6:14 p.m. The ground rescue team was assembled and logged into the system at 6:49 p.m. They began ascending immediately. They were experienced. They moved without hesitation. They did not stop for anything. They reached James Okafor's GPS position at 9:02 p.m. James had died at 8:51 p.m., 11 minutes. The rescue team was 11 minutes too late. He had been sitting on that slope, alive, for 4 hours and 33 minutes. 4 hours and 33 minutes, during which a ground team could have been moving, during which a helicopter could have been dispatched, turned back by weather, and a second attempt coordinated, during which any one of a dozen possible interventions could have changed the outcome. Instead, 90 of those minutes were spent on phone calls about insurance policy language. The aftermath moved quickly once the inquiry began. The base camp coordinator was dismissed within 2 weeks of the incident. Pinnacle Ascent Group's K2 operating license was revoked by Pakistani mountaineering authorities, pending a full review. The UK headquarters released a statement expressing profound sorrow and outlining a series of internal protocol changes. The insurance policy in question was flagged by the inquiry board as containing language that created a documented decision delay risk in emergency situations, and was referred to the Financial Conduct Authority for review. The inquiry board's final ruling used 4 words that appear in the official record in bold: preventable fatality, systemic, organizational failure. The Mountaineering Safety Incident Database classification reads, delayed emergency response resulting in fatality. Contributing factors listed include inadequate emergency decision-making authority at field level, absence of a mandatory immediate response protocol for HAPE diagnosis, and organizational prioritization of insurance liability assessment over rescue initiation. Dawa Sherpa returned to K2 the following season. He has not spoken publicly about the incident beyond his inquiry testimony. Other guides who know him say he does not talk about it. That is the kind of thing that makes sense when you understand what he held on that slope for 4.5 hours, and what he was left holding at the end. James Okafor was 36 years old. He had a family in Lagos who received a phone call that night. He had done his research. He had chosen carefully. He had paid for full support. He had trusted a system that presented itself as built for exactly this moment. And when the moment came, that system spent an hour and a half on the phone with an insurance broker in Edinburgh, while his guide tried to keep him breathing on a frozen slope above 7,000 meters. He died 11 minutes before help arrived. 11 minutes is not a long time. It is shorter than most lunch breaks. It is shorter than the average commute. On K2 at 7,800 meters, with HAPE progressing and temperature at minus 27 and night coming in from the west, 11 minutes is the distance between a man going home to his family and a man becoming a statistic in a mountaineering incident database. The mountain did not kill James Okafor. A phone call did. And that is the truth that makes this incident impossible to set down. Not the altitude, not the cold, not the mountain's indifference to human ambition and human preparation and human care. Jack, what makes this one stay with you is the knowledge that at 4:18 p.m. on that day, when Dawa's voice came through on that radio with GPS coordinates and a diagnosis and a clear request, James Okafor still had time. Someone chose not to use it. On K2, the choices that kill you are almost always made before you ever leave base camp. but sometimes they are made in a tent at base camp, on a satellite phone, by someone who was never on the mountain at all. The inquiry board's final report was submitted to the Pakistan Alpine Club in the spring of the following year. It contained 17 recommendations. Among them were a mandatory immediate response rule, requiring base camp coordinators to contact official rescue services within 15 minutes of any high altitude medical emergency, regardless of insurance status. A requirement that all expedition companies operating on K2 above 7,000 meters hold pre-authorized rescue coverage with no eligibility assessment clauses, and a recommendation that field guides be granted independent authority to initiate official rescue calls without waiting for base camp approval. Pinnacle Ascent Group never reopened. The UK office closed quietly 8 months after the incident. The website went dark. The 15-year safety record they had cited was removed from the internet without comment. None of the 17 recommendations have been made legally binding as of the date of this video. James Okafor's name was added to the K2 Memorial at base camp, where the names of climbers lost on the mountain are inscribed on small plaques fixed to a cairn of stones carried up by those who loved them. His family traveled to Pakistan the following summer to place his. His daughter, who was 9 years old when he died, carried the stone herself from base camp to the memorial. K2 has now claimed over 90 lives since records began. Each one of those names was a person who believed the system around them would hold. Some systems do not hold, and on the second highest mountain on Earth, when a system fails, 11 minutes is all it takes.